And hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Unslaved Podcast. Very happy to be here with you once again to bring you another episode. And we're going to be chatting today about Michael's recent premium addition to the premium library. We're speaking about the book by Phyllis Chesler about women's inhumanity to women. It may be one of the most controversial subjects of our time, given the current climate we find ourselves in with all the current discussions going on. But it's an important discussion to have. And Michael, you did a fantastic job in that presentation, breaking down the work of an actual leading feminist, brilliant writer, author, someone who has spent a lot of time dedicating her life to the feminist theories. And she would still consider herself a feminist. However, it seems like she broke away from the status quo within that little grouping. And when you opened up that series, you did a really good job of summarizing, the introduction of the book, where you were just sharing, the author is sharing her experience dealing with some of these feminists and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we could start there just as a review for people that may not have had the chance yet to go and check that presentation out.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, the content we're dealing with today isn't directly connected. There's so much of this that, this is the second program to continue investigating. It's not one-to-one the same as what we did before. But the thing with the book was that it is a brave attempt, right, to delve into, as you said, a very controversial subject, but it's far from complete. Must say that, right? It merely prefaces the whole subject, but it's a masterly preface, though, right, about the criminal history of womankind. She does also speak about the few people who, previous to her, women, feminists, a lot of them feminists again, who went into the subject. Oh, not a lot, but a few. And she also speaks about the peculiar silence. This is her own term, peculiar silence on the subject, which is amazing revelation, isn't it? Since we all know that feminists have delved into every corner. It's almost their penchant. Look how many universities there are. Look how many faculties. Look how many individual writers there are. The thing is absolutely ubiquitous. And yet, there's a peculiar silence about the criminal history aspect. So right away, the whole thing is suspect, right? Now, of course, there are others like Alice Miller, the great psychologist, who they weren't caught in this. She wasn't any feminist in the first place. And she had no delusions about, the real nature of motherhood and the real nature of the Oedipus and Electra complexes, but that's a whole separate thing. And we'll be doing a series, on her work down the line. But what I think is that Chesler, then, being a feminist in her life, she researched the book for over 20 years. She got a glimpse then, like a keyhole vision of what the Alice Millers, and the child psychologists like Melanie Klein, I think she got a glimpse into that world. It was surprised, turned a corner, didn't realize. And then after realizing what the hell is going on there, had the choice to make, to whether to recoil and just go back and find some other, women's study issue, or to dive right in. And she hesitates, right? She's reeling from the shock. You can tell it in the book, as she tries herself to download what the subject matter is, woman's inhumanity to woman, which for a feminist who spent her whole life accusing men, she's reeling from the shock. But if then we follow the trail that she took, that proves invaluable, right, to us. And especially to those who are maybe completely unaware of any of this. Like there's people listening to us now and people in general who have no idea there's even such a subject as she covers, that there's even a subject called female psychology, for Christ's sake. But those who do know it, and say the average anti-feminist like myself, then this book is absolutely essential. But as I say, even for a layman who wants to get beyond the Dr. Phil, and minus level, then this is for you, because you're following the trail that she led as a pro-feminist and like an archaeologist uncovering some of this evidence, and she does insist I think it's in the introduction, maybe in the body of the book, that this is a psychological treatise. Now she says, I'm presenting this as a book of psychology, female psychology, which is good, but at the same time, in my opinion, it really isn't, because it doesn't go deep enough. But with that said, it's still a very, very important, valuable book to have. And as I say in the program, we, people like us need to know about these things, because it's one of many volumes, many thinkers who I don't want to see being airbrushed, just because their works are sacred cows, they're touching on sacred cows, and have become then, stigmatized because of that.
Right. No, absolutely. And I was just thinking about how this term feminist has taken hold in people's minds. The media has done a good job. The feminist camp has done a really good job of insinuating themselves and creating these little, it's a grouping that now if you say, hey, I'm an anti-feminist, or I don't agree with feminist ideology, or I have a problem with neo-feminism or whatever, people instantly equate that with that you're anti-woman, or that you're just some kind of misogynist. Like see the equation gets brought because they've done such a good job of saying our movement is so legitimate that any criticism of it means you are a hateful person. And this was something that was brought out really brilliantly in the interview we did recently, drawing a blank here. We were talking about how, the postmodernism, the PC culture, the whole idea that it was a way of hating, you hate your own culture. Kent Clisby, that's right. And so when we kind of tie that together, what would you say to that, Michael, about that idea that anybody that's saying, hey, I don't agree with feminism, or I don't like feminism, or I'm actually against it. But that doesn't mean that in any way that we're saying we're against women in general.
Well, most women aren't feminists, so there's your answer. And funny enough, when you hear people like Chesler quoting or citing certain books, you see, they don't tell you that a lot of those books are written by non-feminists about women. So that's another nuance to look at. They're citing books, and they don't tell you which ones are feminist writers, lesbian writers, or just completely, regular scholars. So they move the goalposts and they play games. So the question, anything like that can be shown to turn, like for instance, a Camille Paglia, and she's only one. I can mention others, right? A Camille Paglia is a person who is more unbiased. Started as a feminist, but thought it through, right? And moved away from the radical, be first wave or second wave feminist. And I think that Chesler is making that move in her own life. So that's what you need to look at, is this sort of disgruntlement from certain figures who have seen the limitations of the movement that they're in. And if that's a man, that's fine, because we should be under no disclaimer, because the attacks upon the male world are so voracious and unmitigated. Why then, when we turn around to point out the flaws in the other, should we be making disclaimers? These people are rabid, and you fight fire with fire. If somebody else from the outside observing this can't take a side and then is sitting on the fence going, I think you guys are misogynist, then you are part of the enemy as far as I'm concerned. See, I'm not a person who then feels favor towards you. To me, you're part of the enemy. I can't get to the enemy because you're in the fucking way. And I'm presenting facts that you have not studied, you have not researched this, and I have. Through and through, since 1989 would be, if I wanted to talk biographically. But in any case, I have studied it, for whatever amount of years and time, and I've read the books. These are thick books, very technical. And so I have the facts, you don't. So that would be my argument, counter-argument back. And I'll give you lists and lists of book, go prove me wrong.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that's the whole point, is everything about what we've been doing here is to present information and present facts that are available to people, but that people are not aware of. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that we are being shown only one side of every argument. So all the arguments and all the opinions that are being laid out on the internet and in your discussions at barbecues or whatever, I mean, these are all opinions that most people have just grazed. It's like a buffet. They're like, oh, I'll take some of that. I'll take some of that Jell-O. I'll take some. And there's no depth to a lot of the opinions that people hold. And that's what I started to discover at a young age, was that when you really started to pin someone down about their opinion, trying to get to the source of it, you realize there is no source. People just hear things. There's emotional responses. People go, yeah, that makes sense. And they're only thinking on such a basic level that in order to bring the full story to people, the amount of work that needs to be done is quite extreme in a way. Like the amount of work, Michael, that you've had to do just for that premium episode that you did on this subject was monumental. And then when you're coming out saying, hey, I'm here as a reporter reporting the facts to you, because most people won't do that kind of research. And so there you go. But the fact that people will still argue with you about it and not look into it and critique you on the points that you didn't even make shows the level of idiocy that we're at right now in this conversation. That's a sad state of affairs. But I do see people waking up. I do see more people that are catching on to this. There's been some great films that have been made, even though they're blocked in so many countries. But there's been great reporting that have been done by both women and men As you say, now we even have leading feminists that are coming out and critiquing their own movement, which is great. I mean, here we have, right. You and I have critiqued the toxic, or what do you call it, the element, the malignant form of masculinity for years. We've talked about, empires and kings and monarchs. We've shown the dark side of, obviously, the male side. But we're talking about human beings. There's a proclivity for women and men to go towards evil actions. And women do it differently than men. And so it's important to understand those differences. And that's something that you were pointing out there, that Phyllis Chesler was pointing out, wasn't it? Where she was talking about how women are aggressive. They're just aggressive in a different way. And if you have a toxic female, there's certain psychological points to that are going to manifest that kind of behavior. In the same way that you were to study male psychology and say, well, that is the way that a male will go towards a violent or whatever type of action. So did you have anything to sort of clarify about the difference between male psychology and female psychology? Because right now they're saying there is no difference. Men and women are equal across the board. It's all just socially constructed or whatever, but the science and the psychology doesn't really back that up.
No, the tyranny is sort of there in human consciousness. And you're right. See, we would come back. See, that's why her book is so important, because apropos of what you just said before, if you're attacked, what are you going to do? You just whip out Phyllis Chesler's book, and that will silence the conversation. You better believe they're going to have a bus to catch at that point. They're not going to engage you looking at that fucking book. And then she points out that women are far more tyrannical to other women than men ever have been. They're far less forgiving of one another. She points out that they're infinitely more vindictive. This is a fucking test. This is psychological tests and behavioral tests. She points out that they accuse others more frequently of the smallest infractions, or when there's really no infraction, they accuse more than men do. They hold lifelong grudges, whereas a man will hold a grudge, but for a lot less time. And also their penchant is for spreading the rumors, the gossips, and instigating the feuds. And we all know women like that. But the thing is, it's institutionalized in certain countries like India, where it's really a matriarchy. You have to understand that India and Malaysia and Polynesia and these places, they're bloody matriarchies, right? And those women are foul, a great deal of them. And they create feuds in which men then go to war. Men go and fight other tribes. It's historical. And she points all of this out. Her book she calls it psychological, but there's a lot of great history in there that you will not find in other books. But if we could turn to the slides, I think is the best answer. Go to the first slide. Maybe you can read actually from her book. Oh yeah, good.
Sorry. Here we go.
Go back to the first one. I'll read that. The first one.
Oh, just bear with me one sec. Here, you know what? I'm going to come back to us. It's just doing something here. Give me one sec. If you just want to talk about something real quick, just give me 1 minute. I will fix this.
Oh, all right.
Why it's doing this?
Yeah, you've got to marshal the facts, especially when you're dealing with a controversial subject. So you have to think like the other person, think like your critic, play devil's advocate with yourself, and that'll be a technique you should absolutely use all the time.
Okay, so we'll go to the first one here.
Yeah, that's the one.
So first one says, over the last quarter century, the world's social scientists pioneered a new body of knowledge about what they call indirect aggression among girls and women.
Okay, go to the next one.
Continue to say, author Bell Hooks would like women to challenge the simplistic notion that man is the enemy and woman the victim. Because male aggression is both so visible and so deadly, it tends to obscure our view of female violence and aggression, which is more often subtle, less visible, but chronic. Female violence has, erroneously, been deemed unimportant because it is unlikely to result in someone's immediate death or serious physical injury.
All right, so there's one of your answers. That would be something you'd have to bring up quite quickly in a discussion of this matter, and that is that it is a bona fide scientific psychological fact. But you ain't heard about it because obviously male violence is more conspicuous and photogenic. It's as simple as that. Go to the next one.
This goes on to say that to now insist that all women are sisters, or that most women, including feminists, are kind or even polite to each other, or that such niceties rise to the level of morality or justice, is foolish and self-destructive.
Now look at that revelation. Isn't that monumental? That's